Thank you for joining us at Secular AZ today. We are a 501c3 organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. We have some great programming. We've been doing a series of school board candidate forums that happen on Wednesday evenings at 6. Next Wednesday, which I believe is the 31st, is going to be the last in our series. We will be talking with some members of the Mesa Public Schools that want to join their school board in a candidate forum. And then we're actually going to transition. We're going to be focused on some of these statewide races. I believe that the first one that we have scheduled so far, we're still working on getting some of these other ones scheduled, but the first one so far is going to be on September 28th with the school board candidates. Hopefully both of them RSVP. So that would be Superintendent Kathy Hoffman and her opponent, Tom Horn. So stay tuned. Then I know that we have one on the books for, I believe it's October 12th, where we will have the Secretary of State candidates talking about their races. So I hope you all will join us for that. Next Friday, we will be speaking to Laura Portondo, who is with the study of reproductive justice at Yale Law School. She's a scholar of the First and 14th Amendments, former judicial strategy fellow at the Center for Reproductive Rights. I also wanted to provide an update about the McAllen, Texas church. For those of you who were here 2 weeks ago with Hemet Mehta, the friendly atheist, he posted an update the other day that the church has apologized and agrees to pay for damages of their actions. And if you haven't seen that discussion with Hemet, please take a look at our YouTube page. You will not regret it. It was a fantastic discussion. We also have t-shirts for sale that say, I read banned books. I'm wearing one right now. If you want one, you can visit secularaz.org. Additionally, we've created a space on our website to showcase secular wedding and funeral officiants. So if you are legally certified to officiate weddings, please reach out at info@secularaz.org with your bio and a picture. And then finally, we do have a fundraising opportunity, and it's been put up by a generous and loyal supporter of Secular AZ. So please consider becoming a member. But today I'm really excited because we are happy to welcome the good folks from Voter Choice Arizona. Voter Choice Arizona aims to improve our elections so that voters have more choice and more voice for better governance and a better Arizona. So we'll be taking questions from the audience. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A or throw them onto the Facebook comments. And with that, I would like to welcome today Ben Bossler, who is with Voter Choice AZ. Welcome, Ben. Could you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jean. Yeah, I'm Ben Bossler, and like you heard, I'm with Voter Choice Arizona. I'm the head of the Speakers Bureau at Voter Choice AZ. I've been working with them for about 3 years now. So yeah, really excited about getting people excited about ranked choice voting in Arizona, because we think it's something that's going to really help with our elections, and we think there's really a possibility that we can get it here in Arizona. So
well, and I'm sure that you're going to be talking about it when you put up your PowerPoint. So if you want to just go right into that, or if you want to give a brief explanation for those who may not fully understand what ranked choice voting is, or if it's covered on your presentation, by all means, we can go ahead and get this party started.
Sure, yeah, I will start presenting. And let me know if you can see that. Everyone see the presentation? All right, cool. So I'm Ben Bossler with Voter Choice Arizona. And as you heard, we're dedicated to bringing more choice and more voice to Arizona elections. And so what does that mean? So the first question is anyone here really satisfied with our current system? Who here thinks that everything in our elections are going really well right now? When you vote in an Arizona election, do you have choices that represent your views? Do you want more candidate choices in your elections? We have negative partisanship. Our campaigns divisive in Arizona? Does it feel like the campaign seasons are too long? And do you feel that candidates are running for office on issues that don't matter to you, right? These are all questions about our current election system. And the question is, how does this keep happening, right? I mean, we vote for these people, don't we? We're electing them into power, and yet somehow we're never satisfied with them. And these campaigns that they're running that are so divisive and partisan, but they do it because it works, right? Like they get elected. So what's happening here? How do we keep voting for these people? How do we keep electing them? And we don't even like them, right? So here at Voter Choice Arizona, we think that the problem is in the way that we vote and that we can fix it. So what's wrong with our current system? Our current plurality voting system is what we call it, is plurality. It fails to eliminate spoiler candidates. It limits your choices in the voting booth. It thwarts majority rule by allowing unpopular and divisive candidates to succeed when there are many candidates. And it distracts from healthy issue-based campaigns. And we also choose candidates in very low participation primary elections. So what's the real problem with our current system? We call it the spoiler effect. So this is your classic example of a spoiler effect. This is the 2000 presidential election. You have three major candidates and nobody has a majority, meaning nobody has more than 50% of the votes. The separation between the frontrunners, Bush and Gore, is only 537 votes. Now, from exit polls, we know that if Nader were not in the race, many Nader voters would have voted for Gore instead, easily enough to make the difference between Gore and Bush in Florida, and ultimately in the whole presidency. So Nader then gets called a spoiler. Because Nader's views were more similar to Gore's than Bush's, George Bush ends up winning the election just because Ralph Nader is in the race. Now, Ralph Nader had every right to run for office, and his voters had every right to express their opinion and vote for Ralph Nader. But the issue here is that because Nader's views were more similar to Gore's, he ends up pulling the election in a way that Nader's voters, we know from exit polls, was their least liked option, right? And so just by being in the race, he changes the results, even though he doesn't win. And this isn't just a partisan problem either. Going back further to 1992, Bill Clinton was elected with only 43% of the vote, while Ross Perot took nearly 19%. If Ross Perot weren't in the race, it's very possible that many of his voters would have voted for H.W. Bush instead, and H.W. Bush could have got more than half of the votes in this election. If that were the case, then Ross Perot entering the race changed the outcome, even though he received the fewest votes of these three major candidates. So even when there's not a spoiler, the current system has a chilling effect on who chooses to run. So this is an example much closer to home, the AZ 2018 Senate election. You had Sinema and McSally also in a very close race. And in this case, the Green Party candidate, Angela Green, actually dropped out in the last week of the election because they were worried about being a spoiler. So imagine how many other candidates don't even begin to run because they're worried about the same thing. So we'd like to think that having more candidates in the race, hearing from a diversity of voices would be a good thing, right? Get a healthy competition, hear from a lot of candidates, and the most popular candidate should win, right? But in our current system, the more candidates you have, the more likely it is that you elect someone who is deeply unpopular. So this is a Republican primary race from 2016 for US House District 5. It's actually my district in the East Valley, South Chandler. Andy Biggs won this election with less than 30% of the vote, with only 16 votes between him and the next candidate, Christine Jones. So out of over 80,000 votes cast, Andy Biggs wins the nomination by getting 16 votes more than Christine Jones, even though 70% of Republicans, right? This is a Republican primary. 70% of Republicans preferred somebody other than Andy Biggs, but Andy Biggs ends up winning the election. And because this is a heavily partisan district, Andy Biggs goes on to win the general. And there are many elections like this where the primary is in many ways more important than the general. So one way that different municipalities or constituencies have tried to resolve this spoiler effect is by holding a runoff election. So, and we saw that with the Georgia elections, Georgia Senate elections as well, where they had the runoffs. So when they don't have any candidates that get more than 50% of the vote, you hold a second election, you take the top two, you hold a runoff. The problem with runoff elections is that they're expensive and they're also less democratic. So in Phoenix, they had a mayoral election in 2018 where there were 4 candidates. No candidate got a majority, meaning more than half. The runoff election came months later, and fewer than half the voters who voted in the general actually voted in the runoff. And the whole thing cost the city more than $1 million to hold this runoff election, all to ensure that you would have a candidate with more than half the votes, and not even half the voters showed up to the election. So what's the solution here? That's where ranked choice voting comes in. Ranked choice voting is a simple change to the ballot. So rather than just selecting one candidate, you rank your candidates from your favorite to your least favorite. And if your favorite candidate doesn't have enough support, then your vote will automatically transfer to your next ranked candidate. So what does that look like? Here's an example of an actual ranked choice ballot used in Maine. So you've got your first through fifth choices, a little bubble sheet, just like you're back in grade school. You've got your candidates over on the left. So if my first choice is, let's say, William Hoare, the independent, I'm just going to bubble first choice right next to William Hoare. My second choice is the other independent, Tiffany Bond. I'll put that as second. And maybe Jared Golden is my third choice. So I'm going to bubble him in. Maybe there's a write-in candidate that I like. So I put him in fourth. And maybe I don't want Bruce at all. I don't even put him on my ballot. I don't even have to bubble him in if I don't want to, right? So I can bubble in as many as I want, just one per row, one per column, first, second, third. Really easy, right? So once we've marked our ballots, how do we count the votes? Counting ranked choice votes, we follow 2 simple steps. First, we check, does anybody have more than 50% of the vote? If anyone has more than 50% of the vote, then great, we have a majority, they're the winner. If not, we eliminate the candidate that has the fewest first place votes and transfer those votes to their voters' next ranked candidate. Then we go back to step 1 and we repeat until we have a winner. So here's an example of a race with 4 candidates. For the first round, we count only the first ranked votes. With our normal ballot, the orange candidate would win with 40% of the vote, even though 60% of people voted for someone else. But with ranked choice voting, we want to ensure that somebody gets more than half the votes. So in this case, we don't have a majority, so we go to step number 2 and we eliminate the candidate in last place. So we eliminated light orange, who had 5% of the vote. And you can see that their voters preferred the other orange candidate as their second choice, right? Some of their voters went for the other orange candidate, some went for the light purple candidate. So now we're back to step 1. Does anyone have a majority? Nope, so we do it again. This time we eliminate light purple, and now you can see that the light purple voters much favored the dark purple candidate, which makes dark purple the true majority winner. So under RCV, there are no spoilers and dark purple wins with the majority of the vote. Now this is the same result that as you would have gotten if you held a runoff election, but without the second wave of expensive campaigning and vote counting and all of that. So So what are the benefits of voting this way? Number one, no more lesser of two evils. You never have to make the decision between voting for the person you like or the person you think can win. You can safely vote for the person who is actually your favorite without worrying about throwing the election away you don't want it to go, because if your favorite doesn't win, you have those backup choices. Second is no more winning with 30 or 40 something percent of the vote. Sometimes the winner will get more than half of the votes on the first round. In that case, the person would win on the first round, just like an election today. But if not, then they will need to have enough second or third or fourth choice votes in order to get to a majority. So a candidate who's disliked by the majority can never win. Third, because there's no risk of vote splitting, more candidates are likely to run, even if they think they can't win. And when a candidate has ideas that are appealing, people can express their support without wasting their vote. And then fourth, this reform can actually disincentivize negative campaigning. So when you have more than two candidates in a race, it's unlikely that anyone's going to get a majority in the first round. So that means any candidate will need the second or third place votes from voters who favor the other candidates. So rather than mudslinging against all the other candidates because a vote for anyone else is bad for you, you instead have an incentive to actually highlight all the things that you agree on. So you can pick up those voters' second and third choice votes. And we've seen examples of this in places that have adopted ranked choice voting. We saw it in Maine, which we talked about a little later there. The independent, Lisa Savage, was telling her supporters to rank the Democrats second. We also saw it in the New York mayoral primary where they used ranked choice voting. You had two of the candidates there actually sharing a campaign stage, right? Even though technically they were competing against each other. And finally, we have data on this. Ranked choice voting can increase voter turnout. So 2016 study of 79 elections in 26 US cities found a 10-point higher rate of people actually voting after elections were switched to ranked choice voting. And to me, this makes sense. When ballot looks like lesser of two evils, voting just doesn't feel pleasant, and maybe my vote doesn't really matter, so I just don't do it. But with ranked choice voting, I have options. I can feel safe in expressing support for my favorite. I don't have to worry about lesser of two evils. I get the options that I want, and people respond. They turn out and they vote. So as you heard me mention, ranked choice voting is not just somebody's thesis paper. This has been used in practice in real elections. More than half the states in the US currently use ranked choice voting in some form for some voters. In 2016, Maine made history when they became the first state to pass a ballot initiative enacting ranked choice voting statewide. And they used it in their 2018 and 2020 elections. New York City passed ranked RCV in 2019, which made them the largest population in the United States to use RCV when they used it in their mayoral race last year. In 2020, 5 municipalities adopted ranked choice voting, and Alaska passed a ballot measure joining Maine to use ranked choice voting in statewide elections. They will be using it in the upcoming elections this November. And it's not just the United States. Ireland has used this voting system for decades, and Australia has used it to elect their House of Representatives for more than 100 years. Now, of course, as you can see, our home state, Arizona, is not on that map yet. However, a recent poll from the Center for the Future of Arizona found that 3 in 5 Arizonas favored moving to ranked choice voting, with support from across the state. So if the people want it, but we're not on that map, how do we get there? So that's where we come in. Voter Choice Arizona. We're a nonprofit formed in 2020 to bring ranked choice voting to Arizona. So our mission is to improve our elections so that voters have more choice and more voice, better governance, and a better Arizona. And our goal is to enact ranked choice voting in the state of Arizona. So how do we get there from here? First, we're focusing on education, like I'm doing right now, just telling people about ranked choice voting, because generally when people hear about ranked choice voting and they get it, they understand it, they think this is a great idea and they get on board. The next part is outreach. So that's trying to bring people into the organization so we get more volunteers, more support. And then we're looking for local adoption and support. So we're looking for cities, municipalities that we can get to adopt ranked choice voting. So once people see it, they get a little bit more comfortable with it. And then we can push for 2024 is currently the goal. Try to get a citizens initiative adopting ranked choice voting statewide. So what can you do to help? You can sign up for more information on our website, voterchoicearizona.org. If you know any other groups like your own that you would like us to speak, that you think could benefit from hearing this speech, we'd love to give a speech to there. You can also donate on our website, and we'd also love if your organization could endorse us. We would be very happy with that. So that's it from me, but I will take questions now. I'm sure we have them.
Well, we do have a board meeting coming up, so that could be something that we put on our agenda to see if Secular AZ would like to endorse the idea of ranked choice voting, at least put it in front of our board of directors. You answered all the questions that I had written down because I wanted to know which states currently use ranked choice, and if there were other countries. So you covered those questions. And then, so we talked about this a little bit before we started the webinar, but, and I see that Diane Post is here if she needs to fill in any gaps for us. But, I asked you about, some of the legislation that we saw this last legislative session was about limiting what municipalities, school boards, government agencies, counties can do kind of preemptively, and I believe that part of this, the origin here was about Flagstaff determining their own minimum wage. And so some people at the legislature didn't like that they were taking matters into their own hands. And or there was the Bisbee plastic bag ban, that they kind of came out and said, yeah, no, you can't do that because we're going to have full authority. The party of local control isn't so much about local control anymore. So, and if you don't know the answer to that, like I said, we could ask Diane to join us.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know anything specific about the legislation that was going through last year. I know that currently there's not any legislation that should be able to preempt ranked choice voting, but that is something that we have had people look at, that I believe that is a possibility that they could pass a statewide law that would preempt any municipalities or cities from adopting ranked choice voting.
And Diane,
So
I
that's
don't want to
definitely
put you on
something
this.
we're concerned about.
Yeah. If you can speak to this, Diane, please by all means do. I don't mean to put you on the spot though.
Well, I don't have a tremendous amount of knowledge about it, but I can say that if they're charter cities, they have more of a chance of winning a lawsuit against the state than if they're not charter cities, because charter cities have more independence than non-charter cities. So some of those things, like you mentioned, the Bisbee thing, they were also mad at Tucson for who knows what, and Flagstaff, et cetera, and even Phoenix doing some things that are far more progressive than what the state legislature does. So charter cities might have a chance, but otherwise we would have to reverse that law when we take control of the legislature.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it sounds like the only way that this could actually happen is through a ballot initiative. It couldn't happen through legislative action. Is that correct?
It could happen through legislative action. It technically could. It hasn't in most of the places that have adopted ranked choice voting. Although after Maine passed the ballot initiative, the legislature did pass legislation to help that along. But it's just our perspective is we think that citizens initiative is going to be the easier path. As far as any of our elected officials are concerned, they were elected by the current system, so they don't really generally have too many issues with it. It's going to be pretty hard to get that kind of support from anyone who's elected in the current system. Thinks that it's going to think that it's working fine, right? So
Well, and I feel like we see this happen too, over and over, where we have, these ballot initiatives, including some of them that in this year and years past about vouchers, and the voters say no. But then somehow we keep getting these anti-education, pro-voucher candidates into elected office. And there's a disconnect there that I feel like ranked choice voting could, remedy, right?
yeah, like I was saying at the start, we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? So something is going wrong in our elections, and we think ranked choice voting can really help with that.
And I don't know if you can go to that back slide or two.
Sure.
You had like the groups that are interested, or areas of Arizona where people were interested. And I'm wondering too, and I don't remember if I saw it on there. Okay, no. But is this more popular with a particular party? Do Dems, Republicans, Independents tend to like it more? Or how, what is that statistic of, who approves of it, who doesn't like it?
Mm-hmm. I don't have that information in front of me, but I do know that it's fairly popular with independents for obvious reasons. And it also tends to be more popular with Democrats. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we are trying very hard to make this, to keep this from becoming a partisan issue. We think that, with all the division and everything, we really want to steer clear of that, because if we get associated with one party or another too far, then the other people are going to accuse you of, trying to rig the elections or anything like that. So we're a nonpartisan organization, and we're trying very hard to keep it that way. So
we do have a few comments and questions here. Let's see. Deborah Burdette asked if we could put the website up. I'm doing that right now. So here you go, Deborah. There's another Deborah here, Deborah Broom, and it's already kind of been answered, but she is asking, how do we get in touch with Ben to invite him to speak at other groups? She's on the board of Pinal County Democrats, LD 16 Democrats, and Dems of Casa Grande. And she'd like to get you on the speaker list, but then she said, never mind, because you put all that information up there. And it is in the Facebook chat as well as the webinar chat. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that question live.
perfect.
And then
Great.
This one comes from one of our board members, student advisory board member, Sammy. And I believe he was the one that connected us. So thanks for that connection, Sammy, because, I can see through the attendees and Facebook that this is garnering a lot of interest. People are definitely interested. Sammy asks, what are the most common arguments you hear against adopting RCV?
Yeah, by far the most common one that we hear is that it's too complicated. And I don't think it's really that complicated. I think once people, get to know it and you get to use it once or twice, they understand what's going on with it, right? And like I said, Maine uses it. They've been pretty happy with it from what I've heard, being able to do it. So that is by far the most common one. You'll also hear lots of things like it turns winners into losers or losers into winners, that kind of thing. And that's just because obviously, it can change the results of the election. That's kind of the point of adopting this is, in the end, you end up with the more popular candidate that gets elected. That's the point. But, in our current system, if you just tally up the votes, you say, oh, they got the most votes, so they have to be the most popular, even though more than half of the people were against them. So that's another really common argument. I think those are some of the biggest ones for sure.
And then John Ralston, who is with your organization.
Yes, yeah,
He's saying in the question answer that it is more popular with Dems and independents above 50% and about 40% with Republicans. And that's according to national polling, which he also shared that poll on both, he's put it on Facebook and I put it on the webinar. So there is a poll that he shared there. Let me go ahead and get rid of some of these questions here. And then we have another question from Jana. Jana says, I have heard that ranked choice voting takes much longer to count. Is that true?
yeah, no, that's a great question. It does take a couple extra steps, obviously, because you have to count the ballots and then eliminate candidates and count them again. But it does not actually take that much longer than a regular election. Maine used it and they had their election results back very quickly. New York had a few troubles the first time that they implemented it, but then they also they accept ballots coming in later through the mail and everything. So a lot of the delays that happened in that election were just due to the normal procedure and not anything to do with the ranked choice voting counting. So I do know that when Maine implemented it, they had it come off without a hitch.
Would we need to make any kind of infrastructure changes, like with the tabulation equipment or anything like that? Could that be, I'm wondering if that could be an argument for saying no to ranked choice voting because it could, cost counties too much money to implement that or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think John might have more details on this than I do. So if he wants to jump in here in the chat, but that is something that we've looked at. And I believe the results of that were that all of our election equipment in Arizona is capable of tabulating ranked choice votings already. Hi,
And
John.
I made his, if you would like to share any of your insight, John, and maybe tell us your role within the organization, that would be great.
Sure. My name is John Ralston. Let's see if I can, I don't think I can do my video. Sorry about that. I'm a volunteer along with Ben. I have several different hats within the organization. In terms of being able to implement it, in terms of like infrastructure and equipment, we've done an evaluation of all the counties, and all the current voting equipment is capable of doing a ranked choice voting election. There's an organization called the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center that has a free tabulation software that's open source. It's been federally verified. So that should not be a problem.
All right. I'm not really seeing any other questions. So folks, if you are curious to learn more and have more questions for these gentlemen about voter choice Arizona, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or put them in Facebook. For now, though, your goal is 2024. So what are your immediate next steps to make sure we get this on the ballot? I'm sure that you're working with attorneys to get the wording just right, because we know that they like to, scrutinize these ballot initiatives up and down. So how are you preparing for those kinds of challenges that will inevitably come up? And I have another question too about this. There's a referendum, right, that's going to the voters this year on the ballot about changing our ballot initiatives from 50% plus one to a 60% majority for ballot initiatives. So I'm sorry, that's two questions, but so the first one is, what are your next steps? And then we can talk about how you feel about that that referendum that's coming up on the ballot.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, right now our real next step is really, we want to grow our organization as much as possible. We want to get as many people involved, as many people, money, and endorsements behind our organization as we can, so that when we do make that push, when it comes in 2024, that we can get that ballot initiative, across the finish line, that we can actually get the necessary votes, which hopefully will be 50% plus one by the time that initiative comes through. And we have, as far as the legal work goes, we're fortunate, and some of the groundwork has been laid already by Maine and other ranked choice organizations that have come before, right? So we have a little bit of a head start there, and we've seen the legal challenges that have happened in Maine. And there are some specific things with regards to Arizona, obviously, and our Arizona Constitution. But as far as our legal people have taken a look at everything, there aren't any, constitutional issues with it happening in Arizona. So,
Well,
and
that's
then
good to hear.
yeah. As far as that other ballot initiative goes, I don't know very much about that one, but it would certainly make our job harder eventually. So.
And I heard recently, actually, that the wording, and again, Diane, I don't know if this is something that you would have the knowledge to chime in on, but I did hear that the wording on that ballot initiative about increasing from 50% plus one to 60%, that it's worded as tax increases, like, anything that requires a tax increase must have a 60%. But I don't know if that's true. And it was just something that I heard at some, meeting or discussion I was attending. So, Diane, do you know more about that?
No, actually, I do not.
Okay, well, thank you for chiming in anyway. So, I don't really see any more questions. I have everything put up. It looks like we might have an early end to this meeting, and everybody can get off to actually enjoying their weekend. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on. Did you want to close us with anything or add something to the discussion? John, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to some of Ben's comments, in particular in terms of the city initiatives. Diane is correct in terms of charter cities having more leeway. Some of the charter cities we've talked to are a little bit reticent of being the first one to stick their head out and have to go through the challenge of a lawsuit between them and the state. So we're currently trying to get a legal opinion on that. So that's where we are with that. In terms of vote counting, as Ben said, there's a little bit, it takes a little bit longer, but it's pretty much automated through voting system software. So there's not a huge delay. The delays that we have seen with ranked choice voting elections, as Ben pointed out, in terms of New York City, and then also recently with Alaska, tend to be longstanding laws in terms of basically ballots coming in through the mail or people being able to correct their ballots. And that is just a delay that would happen regardless with or without ranked choice voting. So there's sometimes a little bit of misinformation or not complete information given in headlines of these types of stories. So just if you see something like that, just read a little bit deeper, because they usually explain it within the body of an article, but it doesn't necessarily get explained in the headline or the first paragraph. But unfortunately, I spammed the Facebook page with a bunch of articles. So if you have any questions about some of the things we discussed, there should be an article that addresses that in the Facebook comments for this presentation. Otherwise, I want to thank you all very much for your time and attention. We very much appreciate it.
Sure. And yeah, thank you for putting all that information up on the Facebook chat. I appreciate that. And I'm sure that our members and people who cross paths with our Facebook page will as well. And if there's an organization that you know of in Arizona, last week we heard from Equality Squad, or if there's a speaker that you think would be someone who is compelling, by all means, those of you who are in the webinar or watching us on Facebook, share that with us, because we would love to hear about great outside of the box thinking. And this one, it's not even really outside the box. It seems so common sense to me. This just makes sense. So when you made the comment that, people don't think it's fair, it's obvious that it's much more fair. So thank you for doing this work. We'll definitely probably be having a discussion about you at our next board meeting. And I wish you the best.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah. And the only other thing I have to add, if you want to learn more, I'm sure it's been posted in the chat, but voterchoicearizona.org. Go there. We have more information. If you want to find out, how you can participate, how you can help support us, all that information is on there. So thank you very much for all the time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe out there.
All right.